Hello, I'm Caroline. Welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'd like to read from this book, the Mythology book, Big Ideas Simply Explained. And in this book, I'd like to share with you the story of King Arthur, or the legend of King Arthur. So I really hope you enjoy. Now I'll get started. The Legend of King Arthur. In brief, the theme: kingship and heroic quest. Sources: Le Morte d'Arthur, The Death of Arthur, Sir Thomas Malory, 1485. Setting: southwest Britain, late 5th to early 6th century CE. Key figures: Arthur, King of Britain, a great warrior with a loyal following of knights. He became king after proving himself by drawing a sword from a stone. Merlin, a sorcerer and later advisor to King Arthur. Mordred, Arthur's illegitimate son by his half-sister. Mordred usurped the throne and later kills his father. Guinevere, Arthur's wife, who committed adultery with the knight Lancelot. Lancelot du Lac, a knight of the Round Table, who was in love with Guinevere. King Arthur has a semi-historical status as the warlord who ruled Britain during a period of chaos created by the departure of Roman forces from Britain. The Welsh Christian monk Nennius, who wrote the Historia Britonum, History of the Britons, in 828, was the first to mention Arthur, writing about him as the victorious leader of 12 battles that culminated in one at Mount Badon in 490 against the invading Angles, Jutes and Saxons. The cleric Geoffrey of Monmouth later included a wily warrior King Arthur in his Historia Regum Britanniae, History of the Kings of Britain, 1136, in which the king conquered Denmark, Iceland, Norway, Gaul and more. The Arthurian legend enjoyed a surge in popularity in the 12th century thanks to the Queen of England, Eleanor of Aquitaine, who was inspired by the romantic stories of knights and chivalry to bring troubadours into her court to tell Arthurian tales. One of the most famous contributions to the legend came from Thomas Malory, who wrote his version from inside London's Newgate prison. Malory based his 1485 work, Le Morte d'Arthur, The Death of Arthur, on such sources as the alliterative Morte Arthur, a Middle English poem from 1400, the Vulgate Cycle, a series of 13th century French romances, and the works of poet Chrétien de Troyes. The ruins of Tintagel Castle remain today. This castle was built in the 13th century CE, but archaeological findings suggest that there was an impressive fortress there in the time of Arthur. Fateful conception. Le Morte d'Arthur was split into 21 books by printer William Caxton in 1485. The first concerns the events that led to Arthur becoming King of Britain. Fate dictated every aspect of Arthur's life, even his conception, which was aided by the dark arts of the wizard Merlin. Arthur's father, King Uther Pendragon had been obsessed with Igraine, the wife of a Cornish duke named Gorlois. To avoid Uther's advances, Igraine hid in Tintagel Castle, on a precipice on the Cornish coast. Merlin struck a deal with Uther. He would make Uther look like a Gorlois and spirit him into Igraine's chamber. If Uther agreed to hand over the foretold child of the union to Merlin to raise as he saw fit. The deed was done, and according to Malory, Arthur was conceived 3 hours after Gorlois' death in battle. As the widowed Igraine then married Uther, this meant that Arthur could later claim legitimacy. Just as Uther had agreed, he gave the baby to Merlin, who took Arthur away to be raised by Sir Ector, a true and faithful knight, with a son, Kay, about Arthur's own age. Arthur was raised ignorant of his parentage, which later proved his undoing. Arthur lusted after and eventually slept with King Lot's wife, Morgause, which was also the daughter of Igraine and Gorlois. With this affair, Arthur committed conscious adultery, but also unconscious incest. Their union led to the conception of a bastard son, Mordred, who Merlin had prophesied would destroy Arthur and all his knights. The sword in the stone. Despite being Uther's son, Arthur did not become king through a simple process of succession. Instead, Arthur had to prove his worth. According to Malory, one day after the death of Uther, a great stone of 4 square feet appeared in a London churchyard, with a steel anvil in the middle of it. A fine sword was stuck in the anvil, and the blade was inscribed with gold letters that read, "Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil is right-wise king-born of all England." It was destined to be taken from the stone only by the true king. The Archbishop of Canterbury called for a tournament, hoping that this would shine some light on who the rightful king was. Even the strongest men could not withdraw the sword from the anvil. Many knights, including Ector's son, Sir Kay, went to London hoping to prove their worth. Upon arrival, however, Kay lost his sword and sent Arthur to fetch another. Noticing the sword in the stone, but unaware of its significance. Arthur easily pulled the blade from the anvil. After proving several times that he could withdraw the sword, Arthur was hailed as the rightful king of Britain. The sword in the stone was not the only famous blade in the tale of Arthur. The sword, named Excalibur, appears in many of the Arthurian legends, and with some suggesting this is the very sword he pulled from the anvil. In Malory's tale, Arthur was given the sword by the Lady of the Lake. After seeing the magical sword and scabbard in the middle of a lake, raised up by an ethereal hand, Arthur promised the lady a future gift in exchange for them. Grail Quest. Books 13 and 17 of Malory's account contain the quest of Arthur and his knights for the Sangreal, the Holy Grail. This aspect of the Arthurian legend was a popular subject in medieval French accounts, such as the Vulgate cycle. Malory based his information on the Holy Grail on a story from this cycle, La Quest del Saint Grail, the quest for the Holy Grail. According to this account, the Grail appeared on the Round Table during the Christian feast of Pentecost, which celebrates Christ's disciples being endowed with the Holy Spirit. The Grail brought forth food and drink. Excalibur is returned to the Lady of the Lake by Bedivere. In Malory's tale, there were two women with that title, the maiden who held the sword, and Nimue, ruler of the Isle of Avalon. For all those assembled before it disappeared again, Arthur and his knights then dedicated themselves to searching for the Grail. The Round Table was a wedding gift from King Leodengrance to Arthur, who married the king's daughter Guinevere. This table is a key element of the legend. During Pentecost, King Arthur gathered his chosen knights in Camelot, his castle and court, and granted them seats at the Round Table in exchange for their fealty. Each knight swore an oath promising never to take up arms in wrongful quarrel for the sake of love or worldly goods. Despite this, many of the books of Le Morte d'Arthur contain tales of quarrels over love, which often ended in tragedy. This was the case for Sir Tristan, who loved the Belle Isolde and was eventually killed by her husband, a king. The most famed romance in the legend is that between Guinevere, Arthur's wife, and his best knight, Sir Lancelot du Lac. The pair had an affair, but were so indiscreet that many schemed to expose their adultery to the king, including Arthur's bastard son, Mordred. Once the affair was exposed, the king was forced to declare war on Lancelot, thus dividing the Round Table as he pursued his own knight back to France. However, while Arthur fought in France, Mordred usurped his throne. This treason reunited Arthur and his knights. The death of Arthur. As its title suggests, Le Morte d'Arthur ends with Arthur's death. Arthur and Mordred wounded each other fatally at the Battle of Camlan. As he lay dying, the wounded king ordered Sir Bedivere to throw Excalibur into the lake. When he did so, he uprose the arm of the Lady of the Lake, who waved the weapon 3 times before she disappeared again. Bedivere carried Arthur to the lake, where he was met by women in black hoods, who took Arthur away in a boat. Malory left it open as to whether the once and future king might one day return. The Holy Grail. The Grail was supposedly the same vessel Jesus drank from at the Last Supper, and that had caught blood from his wounds during the crucifixion. According to Malory, it had been taken to Britain by Joseph of Arimathea. The Holy Grail first appeared to Arthur's knights, covered by a rich white cloth, accompanied by thunder and lightning. Malory emphasized that the knight's quest was a journey of the soul as well as the body. Spiritual effort was required to overcome sinfulness. Although Lancelot was a knight without peer, the sin he committed with Guinevere made him impure, and therefore unable to achieve true knowledge of the Grail. In the early tales, the Grail was not explicitly called holy, but it was associated with Christianity. Chrétien de Troyes described it as an elaborately decorated bowl that contained a single wafer for a Catholic Mass. Some scholars believe that the idea of the Grail can be traced back to the mystical cauldrons of Celtic mythology. The Holy Grail is depicted in the middle of the round table. The Grail was variously imagined as a chalice, bowl, or stone. The 12 Knights of the Round Table are named in all medieval tellings of the legend. Different sources suggest numbers ranging from 12 to 250 knights at the Round Table in total. Lancelot du Lac, Geraint, Gareth, Gaheris, Tristan, Gawain, Bors de Ganis, Galahad, Kay, Bedivere, Lamorak, Percival, and King Arthur. And that's where I'll stop the video. I really hope you enjoyed this story, and if you did, I hope you would join me again for another video soon. Thank you for watching. Bye.